Okay, hi everybody, and thanks for joining us on today's webinar. My name is Tom Austin, and I'm the Head of Pre-Sales Engineering here at Redgate Software. And for those of you who tune in regularly to our webinar series, you may have heard me speak about similar topics many times before. But today, I'm going to take a backseat because we have a very special guest, and I'm delighted to welcome Abel Wang. Abel is a senior cloud developer advocate who specializes in DevOps and Azure. And you have a background in application development, right?
That is correct.
Excellent. Now, I'm not going to say too much right now because I'm going to let Abel introduce himself shortly. But before I hand over the controls, I just want to let you know about a few housekeeping points that we'll have in place as we go through the webinar. So for the duration of our presentation today, I will unfortunately have the attendees on mute. This is just so that we can keep a clear line so that we can hear what Abel's got to say and follow along without interruptions en route. But if you do have any questions, any pressing things that you need answered, then by all means, please do tap them into the chat window or the questions box, and I'll be sure to keep an eye on those so that we can cross off any that we don't get covered throughout the presentation at the end. We've got time, so I'm sure we'll be able to tackle any of those questions. Now, the session today will also be recorded, and we'll be publishing this recording along with the Q&A after the end of the webinar. So you will likely get a follow-up email with a link to this recording, along with any other resources that are important for you to have access to. So, time to hand the floor over to you, Abel, to talk about DevOps for All.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here in the UK talking about DevOps for All, or to borrow from Oprah, you get some DevOps and you get some DevOps. So before we begin, let me do a quick intro so you guys get a feel of who I am. My name is Abel Wang. I'm a senior cloud developer advocate for Microsoft. A big, long, fancy title, right? But what is it that I actually do? I write code. I've been writing code for over 20 years. I eat, drink, and live writing code. It makes me ridiculously happy. It pretty much just defines who I am, right? I'm that weird guy that spends all day at Microsoft writing code, and I'm super stressed out, and I get home, and the way that I kick back and relax is I pull out my laptop and write more code. That's just what makes me happy. Right? So some recent roles that I've had, I've been a process consultant. I'm a certified Scrum Master. I've been an ALM Ranger. I write code with the VSTS team. My area of specialty is definitely around DevOps, General App Dev, Visual Studio, and of course, Azure. I am on Donovan Brown's team, and in the lower right-hand side, you see a picture of our entire team. We are all DevOps practitioners. And yeah, so that's who I am, that's what I do, and some fun stuff. Back in the day, I used to be a rock star. Wow. Well, don't be too impressed. I thought I was a rock. In my mind, I thought I was a rock star. Unfortunately, I wasn't very successful, so now I'm in the UK talking about DevOps instead of playing stadiums. I'm also a runner. I love to run. It helps clear my head. And one of my goals is to run the Great Wall of China Marathon. So I'm currently training for that. I don't want to be this guy right here. That guy in the red throwing up in the middle, right? So we'll see how that goes. All right, so DevOps. Before we begin, I kind of want to level set and explain what DevOps is for Microsoft, right? Because if you ask 20 different people what DevOps is, you're going to get 20 different answers. Oh, DevOps, it's all about automation, or DevOps, it's about feature switches, or DevOps, it's all about infrastructure as code. And I'm not saying that those are wrong definitions, but just so that we can frame this conversation, let me give you Microsoft's definition. So at Microsoft, DevOps means something very specific to us. DevOps is the union of people, process, and products to enable the continuous delivery of value to our end users. Now, notice I said that very, very carefully, right? I said continuous delivery of value. I didn't say continuous delivery of features, right? Because we could be giving features after feature after feature, but if we're not delivering value, who cares, right? And I didn't say continuous delivery of code because we can deliver code and more code and more code. And what does that give our end users? absolutely nothing, just a pile of code that we might not even be able to ship out into production, right? So we need to address all three pillars: people, process, and our products. So the people portion, that's probably the toughest, right? That's we're talking culture here. And at Microsoft, we recently made a DevOps transformation where we were a very waterfall company. We delivered new software once every 3 to 4 years. But we've transformed and now we're delivering software, at least for the Visual Studio Team Services team. We deliver software once every 3 weeks, like clockwork. Every 3 weeks, we deliver new features. They just magically show up. What we don't tell people, which I think we should, is every single day we actually push out into production multiple times per day for bug fixes, patches, and things like that. So depending as a dev, depending on which branch of code I'm in, the changes that I make could flow out to production on that very same day. So we've gone from extremely waterfall to extremely agile and fully adopted this DevOps mindset. But it hasn't been easy, and we've definitely had to address the people, where now everyone be in lockstep and hyper focused on continually delivering value. So we've had to knock down walls. We've had to change our structure of our teams. So instead of having devs and ops and QA and the BA team, we've got rid of everybody and just said, you know what, we are going to have a team of engineers, and everybody must be hyper focused on continually delivering value to our end users. Right? So it's a cultural change that we had to make. In this talk, it seems like it was very simple. It was not simple. It was very difficult, very painful. But we made it, and now we're much better for it. The next is the process. So in a DevOps world where we are continually delivering value to our end users, we need to have a process that will let us iterate fast enough, yet still deliver code of high enough quality, right? So I need to be able to plan my work, and as I'm working on my work and checking my code in and out, I need automated builds to kick off every time I check in my code. And then I need all of my automated tests to run, my unit tests. And if everything looks good, I need a pipeline that will pick up those bits and start deploying those bits through my dev environment, QA, UAT, all the way out into production. And I need this pipeline to be automated because I need this, potentially this could be happening many, many times. So I need this process to be repeatable and exactly the same every single time, consistent, repeatable and consistent. And the only way I can get that is through automation. And when code finally reaches production, it doesn't end there, right? I still need to be able to monitor my app, see what's going on. I need to be able to answer three important questions. Is my app up or down? Is my app performing well? And what are users really doing in my application? Because those things help determine, am I giving value? And that can help reprioritize what I'm going to be doing in my next iteration. So I need a process that kind of works like that. And of course, I'm not going to say Agile is the only way, but Agile is the only way. I'm kidding. Agile is not the only way, but it sure makes things work well in the DevOps world. And finally, we need to have products that will help enable all of this, right? Because it's not easy to do everything that I just said. So we need tools and products that will help us do all of that. So of course, today I'm going to talk about our solution at Microsoft, which is Visual Studio Team Services. Now, some of you might know Visual Studio Team Services very well. Some might not. And if not, what is VSTS, or Visual Studio Team Services? A lot of times when I ask that question, people look at me and say, oh, I know what that is. That's your source control system, right? And that makes me cringe just a little bit, because VSTS is so much more than a source control system. It is everything you need to have a software project, to manage all aspects of creating software, from the moment you have an idea all the way until you're ready to sunset the project and you're done. So VSTS is literally everything you need to take an idea and turn that into a working piece of software in the hands of your end user for any language targeting any platform. Now, that last statement I made, that's the super important part. Any language targeting any platform. I know Most people, when they think of Microsoft, they think of the old school Microsoft where everything has to be .NET, everything has to be running on Windows, but this ain't your daddy's Microsoft anymore. You can use any language targeting any platform, and VSTS is that ultimate DevOps solution for you. So how does VSTS do all that, right? That's a lot to be the ultimate DevOps solution. Well, it does that by having 6 key functional areas. It has an agile planning, or what I like to call the work item tracking section, where in VSTS, you're able to track any unit of work in your software project. And being able to track that, you have some great agile tools like backlogs and Kanban boards and delivery plans. You also have a version control system in VSTS. You actually have 2 version control systems. You have a centralized version control system and also a distributed version control system. Now, the distributed version control system is just Git. It's not some weird Microsoft-only version of Git. It's just the open source implementation of Git. There's also an automated build, automated testing. There's a release pipeline. And of course, you can do application monitoring in VSTS as well. So if you look at how we build software today in an agile world, in a DevOps world, you kind of get this cyclical view, right? Where we first start off from a backlog. And from the backlog, we figure out what we need to do. Anybody can put stuff on the backlog. The product owner is going to prioritize it. Then the teams start looking at the backlog and say, this is what we're going to do for this particular iteration. And they start working on it. And as they're working on it, they're checking their code in and out. Builds are being kicked off, unit tests are being run, our CI/CD, kicks off right CD, continuous delivery is going to pick up those bits that look good and start delivering it through our Dev, QA, UAT, all the way out into production. And once it reaches production, it doesn't end there. We can do continuous monitoring while it's in production to help us figure out if we're delivering value, right? So VSTS can do all of this. So it really is the ultimate DevOps solution. And I have done countless demos of VSTS, the CI/CD pipeline. But what makes me really excited is that today, I am really happy to be here to show you guys some new features in VSTS that makes it even better, right? We always say VSTS is the ultimate DevOps solution into Azure. But today and now, with the new Azure DevOps project, we can now literally give you an end-to-end DevOps pipeline with just a couple of clicks, right? So what do I mean by a DevOps project? A DevOps project, well, it's a team project in Visual Studio Team Services. It's sample code for the language that you picked. It's a CI/CD pipeline that will take your sample project, compile it, run your unit test, build it, and deploy it into infrastructure in Azure that gets deployed for you. And you get all of this with just a couple of clicks. It is that easy to do. So without further ado, let me dive in and show you how easy it is to create one of these Azure DevOps projects.
Fantastic.
All right. So the way you create a DevOps project, the first thing you're going to do is going to go into your Azure portal. Now, from the portal, you're going to create a brand new resource. And the resource that we want to create is a DevOps project. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to ask you, what language do you want to use? Now, this right here, if nothing else proves to you that this ain't your daddy's Microsoft anymore, I don't know what. Because you can choose .NET, of course. You can choose Java. You can choose Node. You can choose PHP. You can choose Python. You can even bring your own code from a Git repo if you want. So literally, almost any language that you want, you can just pick it and we'll use it. Now for this demo, I'm going to choose .NET because that's the language I'm most familiar with. And I'll go ahead and click on Next. And next is going to ask me which framework do I want to use, ASP.NET or ASP.NET Core. For this demo, we'll just choose ASP.NET. Then it's going to ask me what infrastructure in Azure do I want to run this on. Do I want to run this on web app for Windows or run this in a virtual machine? Now, if I chose one of the other languages like .NET Core, which can run on anything, then this selection would be much bigger, right? I'd be able to run it in web app. I could run it in a Linux container if I wanted to. I could run it on a Kubernetes cluster, right? So depending on the language that you pick, the infrastructure that you can choose is going to be different. So we'll go ahead and just run this as a web app on Windows. And now it's going to ask me, what instance of Visual Studio Team Services do you want to use? You can create a brand new one directly from here. And I'm going to go ahead and use an existing one. And I'm going to use my demo account. So let me find my demo account. Here we go. And we'll give this project a name. We'll just call this Redgate. And let's deploy this instead of South Central. Let's deploy this in West US2. And I'll click on Done. And oh, that's it. That's all I need to do. Bam, done. Right? Now I just need to kick back, relax, and let Azure do its thing. Right? So it's going to take a little bit of time to do all of this because Azure is going to do a lot of stuff. First, it's going to create for me a team project in Visual Studio Team Services. And when it's done doing that, it's going to upload for me sample code in the language that I picked. So the language that I picked was ASP.NET, right? So it's going to build for me a sample, not build, sorry. It'll take a sample code for me, upload it, and put it into my Git repo. Then it will create for me a CI and CD pipeline that makes sense for the language that I picked. And then it will build, test, and then deploy my app into infrastructure that it's already provisioned for me out in Azure as well. So the full end-to-end DevOps project. Now the magic is there's nothing for you to configure. There's nothing for you to install. Everything just works, right? Just like magic. And when this is finally done, you get a screen that looks like this. Now this screen right here, this blade, this shows you everything that it created. Your CI/CD pipeline. And here you have deep links into the code repository. And this will take you directly into VSTS to see exactly what code we uploaded. Here is the build, the CI, and once again, this is a deep link that will take you into VSTS directly into the build definition. And here's the release definition. Here is our code repository. And here on the right-hand side, we have all the Azure resources that we deployed. In this case, it's a web app. Here's the endpoint, and we've also deployed Application Insight. Now, just because we built everything for you and everything just works, you still have complete control over everything. And you can customize everything to your heart's content. Let me show you what I mean. Let's go ahead and jump into the code repo. So here's the code repo. As you can see, this is just a Git repo with my sample code. I also have my build. So here's my build. And what we have done is we've created a build pipeline for you that makes sense for the technology that you picked. So remember, I picked an ASP.NET web application. So my build is going to be a build pipeline that makes sense for an ASP.NET app. First, we restore your packages from NuGet. We build your solution using Visual Studio. We run all of your unit tests using Visual Studio Test. And when that's all done, we package everything up and publish it back to VSTS. Right. So when this is successful, we'll go ahead and release it through our release pipeline. And just like the build, we create a release pipeline for you that makes sense for the technology that you picked. So in this case, we create a pipeline, and it's a fairly simple pipeline. It's to a dev environment, and it's just one environment. And we go ahead and deploy, because this is deploying a ASP.NET application into app service, we just use a deploy app service task. So when it's all done, we will go ahead and deploy your application into the endpoint, and we'll launch it, and bam, there's your application already running in Azure. How cool is that?
It's amazing, isn't it? It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, nothing for you to do, right? Nothing for you to configure. Everything just works. So some of you probably are now thinking, okay, this is great, but how do I get my real code into here, right? Mm. Well, it's actually really simple to do. So let me show you what I mean. If I go into my repo, let's jump into the repo. This is literally just a Git repo. So I could clone my repository on my hard drive, delete all the files, copy and paste my files, push it up there, hooray for that, I'm done. That's literally all we have to do. And then once we push our code into the repo, it'll kick off our build and the release pipeline. And for a while there, that's what I've been showing. But I think a cooler demo to show is, you know what else we can do? Let's go into the build pipeline. Instead of using VSTS as our repo, I can edit the build definition to say, let's go ahead and use a GitHub repo. So let's go to our sources. We'll go ahead and choose a GitHub account. We need authorization, so let me get my token. And I hope that's my token. We'll find out. We'll authorize this. And it looked like everything worked. Hooray for that. Let me find my Redgate demo. So right now, I'm connecting my build to my GitHub repo to a application that I wrote that's hosted in GitHub right now. And I'll go ahead and save this. And we'll queue it too. And bam, just like that. I've now put my real code in here. Of course, it's queued up with my agent queue. So it might take a little bit of time to queue it, build it, and deploy it all the way out.
Pretty straightforward though, right?
Very, very straightforward.
Goodness me.
It's kind of blows my mind just how easy it is to do everything now. It hasn't always been that way, right, with our tools?
Yeah, yeah.
So hopefully what you guys have gotten from this is with just a couple of clicks, I'm able to create a full end-to-end DevOps pipeline in whatever language that I want, right? I chose ASP.NET because I'm a Microsoft guy and I'm super familiar with it. But if you wanted to choose a Node application, that's not a problem. Java, not a problem. Python, not a problem, right? And we will build you this full end-to-end pipeline that now you can go in, configure it, customize it, and do whatever you need to.
Absolutely incredible. Every time I see this type of thing, it just amazes me how much further it comes each and every time.
Yeah.
Abel, I must say, we've had some reports that the audio of the presentation today is cut in and out a little bit.
Oh,
to anybody who is experiencing that, I can confirm that we are recording the presentation, and on our end, the audio seems to be coming through okay. So we will be sending out the recording, and I suspect that actually within that recording, the audio will be actually fine and okay, and so you'll be able to catch up on any bits that you missed. Sorry to interrupt, Abel. Please do continue.
Oh, no problem at all. All right, so the next thing that I wanted to show you guys was, okay, with a couple clicks, I'm able to create this DevOps projects for just about any language that I want to, and I can slip my code in here really easily. But the build and release pipeline, let me go ahead and pull those up. They were fairly simple, right? Let me actually find the right page. Here we go. It's a fairly simple build and it's a fairly simple release pipeline. So what I wanted to do was show you how easy it was to, or how easy it is to come in here and customize this build and to make it more like a real world build, right? Because right now it's just building one simple application, right? The app that I've uploaded is actually quite complex. It has an ASP.NET web app. It also has a .NET Core REST API, which I want to run in a Linux container, a Docker container. And I want to eventually run that in a Kubernetes cluster. And it also has an iOS mobile portion.
Wow.
So is it possible for me to take that code, which I've already uploaded, and manipulate this build, which we created for you, so that will build all of that? Right? And the answer is, well, of course, the answer is yes, otherwise I wouldn't have brought it up, right? So here's the fascinating thing, right? The way that we can edit this build, first, is we can look at the phases, and we can add different phases. So let's go ahead and add a phase so you guys can see. So a phase is basically you're just saying, I'm going to use a certain type of agent. And in VSTS, right out of the box, are hosted agents. We give you hosted agents for Linux, Mac, and also Windows. So let that sink in for a second. right? We are the only cloud vendor that gives you hosted agents for all three platforms, Windows, Linux, and also Mac. Why do I need Mac? If I do anything mobile, I need, or for iOS, I have to have a Mac to compile, right? That's part of their licensing. So now you can have no infrastructure of your own, and we're able to build anything for you, right? Once again, not your daddy's Microsoft, right? Mm-hmm. Any language targeting any platform. So great, let's go ahead and we can rename this. Instead of phase one, we can say this is to build our web app. And the second phase, we'll go ahead and use a Mac agent, and we'll call this our iOS. And then to customize the build, you're going to go ahead and add and remove tasks, right? Because the build system in VSTS is just a task-based build system that does one task after another after another. So out of the box, VSTS comes with about 100 tasks that span all sorts of languages, all sorts of platforms. So you find what you need, you drag and drop it onto the screen, and just start using it, right? So what if you want to do something or need to do something that doesn't exist out of the box? If you need to do something like that, just go to the marketplace. In the marketplace, our partners have created over 500 build and release tasks that you can just download and start using. Right. $1,000,000 question. What if you need to do something that doesn't exist out of the box, doesn't exist in the marketplace? Are you out of luck? Of course you're not, or I wouldn't have brought that up again, right? No, I'm kidding. It's very, very easy to write your own custom build and release tasks in VSTS, right? Custom build and release tasks, they're nothing more than PowerShell or Node.js. So what that means is anything that you can do from the command line, you can easily do from a custom task. You can create a custom task, wrap it up, upload it to VSTS, and voila. You've just now customized and made VSTS do whatever you need it to do. All right, so I'm not going to sit here and bore you by dragging and dropping a bunch of tasks and filling in parameters. That's awfully boring. So I'm going to show you my finished build, right? Where here is my first phase for my web app. And I think I added one task. I'm scanning all of my code using White Source Bolt because I'm using some open source libraries. So I want to make sure those are okay. And I have another phase that's going to run on our hosted Mac agents that will build my iOS application. And then I have one final phase that will build my REST API using .NET Core. And when it's done building my .NET Core, it's going to build me a Docker image. And then it's going to push my Docker image to Azure Container Registry. And it's also going to copy my YAML files over there, right? So now it's ready to be deployed into a Kubernetes cluster. So can you customize this build? Absolutely. Yes, we create a build pipeline for you, yet you still have 100% control to do whatever you need to do in this build pipeline. So the same thing exists for the release pipeline, because remember, our release pipeline that we create for you, super simple, one environment. But if we want to make this more real world like, maybe we want a QA environment. And after our QA environment, maybe we want to go into our prod environment. Along the same lines, remember, I have a web portion, I have a .NET Core REST API portion, and a mobile portion. So maybe I want to, in parallel, create more environments, right? And so this can be for my REST API. REST API dev, and I can continue cloning it, right, for my REST API QA, and then also create a third parallel deployment for my mobile portion. And then after I create all these environments, I can go into my environments and then configure the task that I need to deploy my application into that environment. So once again, just like the build, to customize your deployment, you would just add and remove tasks. And out of the box, you get the same experience, hundreds of tasks to choose from. You can go to the marketplace, or you can create your own custom tasks. So again, I'm not going to just drag and drop and make you guys watch me do that, because that's just not fun. So I'll go ahead and show you my release pipeline And this is a real release pipeline that releases in parallel my web app, my API into a Kubernetes cluster, and also my mobile app all the way out to the App Store. Right, so I have 3 releases in parallel using 3 different types of agents. And then if you look at what I'm doing to deploy my web app, I'm just using an Azure App Service to deploy. I'm using my SQL DAC pack to deploy. I should have used Redgate. And then I'm running my Selenium UI test against my deployed environment to make sure everything looks good. These are just smoke tests that I'm running. If we go into, let's go back to my pipeline. My API, what I'm doing here is I'm using a Kubernetes task to deploy my Docker image. And then I'm using a quick little web test to make sure that it actually deployed successfully. And finally, let's go back to my pipeline. For my mobile, lost my mouse for a second. I'm using Visual Studio App Center to help me distribute this first to my beta testers, and then eventually all the way out to the App Store itself, the Apple App Store. So once again, we give you a pipeline. Maybe it's very simple for a nice, simple type of example, but there's nothing stopping you from coming in here and configuring this as much as you need to for your real-world scenarios. All right, so after we create this release pipeline, what we usually do next, let me jump to the right screen, is we've created this pipeline, we've created all these different environments. Now we can add approval gates. So before and after every single environment, we have the ability to add manual approvals. And we've always had this ability. But from very recently, we've just given you guys the ability to create automated approval gates based off of continuous monitoring. So let me show you what that is, because that's super exciting. So let me turn on my gates.
I've not seen this before. I'm quite excited by this. This is very new.
I can turn on an approval gate. So remember, we can do this before and after each environment. So I'm doing this after my QA environment. And we'll go ahead and add, and out of the box, we have 4 different types of automated approval gates you can add. So we'll start from the bottom first, because it's easier that way. The query for work item gate uses a work item query to help you determine if your gate should pass or not. So the way that we use this in-house to deliver and deploy Visual Studio Team Services, we have an automated approval gates that queries for blocking bugs. If it finds a blocking bug, guess what? Bam, it stops that deployment then and there.
Incredible.
And if there are no blocking bugs, then it'll pass through the gate. So of course, we also have, after that, we have a manual approver that has to look at it as well. But this definitely helps us speed things up. Another type of gate that we can have is a query Azure Monitor alerts. So what this gate uses is application insight to determine if you should pass your gate or not. So we use this as well to deploy Visual Studio Team Services. We deploy it into one of our rings. It will sit in the ring for 24 to 48 hours. And while it's sitting, it's gathering telemetry with application insight. And if there are too many alerts, bam, the release will just automatically be stopped.
Okay.
The next 2, invoke the REST API and invoke Azure Functions. Those are the extensibility points for these gates. So you can use either an Azure function or calling a REST API to help determine if you should pass or fail the gate. So in this way, you can make your gates behave in whatever fashion that you want it to. So one recent medical company that I was helping out at, they had an interesting use case where they literally could not push into production until a physical document was signed and uploaded into their DocuServe server or some type of document management server.
Okay.
So they needed that physical signature. And there was always a huge lag between getting the signature, verifying that there was a physical signature, and then approving it to go to the next gate.
Sure.
So what we ended up doing is we wrote the document server that they had, I can't remember which one they used. There was a REST API that you could use to call to determine if it passed or if this document was signed or not.
Wow.
So we just created invoke REST API gate, and bam, it would automatically figure it out for us. So when it would run, you get a release that looks like this. All right, so this is my release report. So it flowed through my QA environment. A physical person approved this, which is probably me. I ran on the agent, deployed everything, and then it ran my post-deployment gates. So when you set up your post-deployment gates or your automated deployment gates, you get to configure the polling cycle and how long to poll for. Right? Mm-hmm. So the first time it checked, I think it checks for 48 hours, and the first time it checks every 15 minutes, I think. So the first, or maybe every 5 minutes. So the first time it checked, that document hadn't been signed. Mm-hmm. Second time it checked, document hasn't been signed. Third time, document was signed. So it then flowed into the production environment. So with these automated approval gates that uses continuous monitoring, it can help you deploy faster and also safer.
It's really impressive. It's absolutely incredible. As I say, it's not something that I've had much experience with, so really delighted to see that.
It's a very new feature. I'm so excited about it. There are so many different uses for it. Like I said, we use this today to deploy Visual Studio Team services. Another one that we've done, we've actually published this this monitor as well. It's a Twitter sentiment monitor.
Oh, okay.
So one of the things that we do is we deploy Visual Studio Team services into rings, and rings serve different regions in the United States. And when we deploy a new version of Visual Studio Team services into, let's say, ring number 2, which I think is Brazil, of course, we're monitoring everything with Application Insight, but we also monitor sentiment from Twitter. And if there are too many complaints from Twitter, it can automatically block that release.
There's a bad vibe here.
Yeah, let's hold things up. Brazil's not happy with us, right? So there's so much that you can do with this, and really your imagination's your limit.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly exciting to me, particularly because, of course, Redgate focuses on the database side of things, and I don't have a conversation without approvals coming up.
Sure.
Databases are so restricted with a lot of the, particularly finance and healthcare, as you say. Mm-hmm. And so this is really, really exciting. It's going to give us a whole bunch of different solutions that we can put in place for people.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's one more thing that I wanted to share with you guys, because as you can see, our build and release pipeline has gotten a little bit more complex, right? Mm-hmm. And the more complex my build and release pipeline gets, the more I really want something like pipeline as code, where I'm able to save my build and release pipeline as code in my source control. So this way I can version my build and release pipeline just like I version my source code, just like I would version my database schema. Right? So everything is versioned together. Another benefit is now I'm able to apply the same processes that I do with my database changes as well as my source code changes as I do with my build and release pipelines if anybody wants to make changes. So they would have to go through a pull request, code review before those changes pass through. Right? So I really want that type of feature, but in VSTS, we've never been able to do that until very, very recently. We announced, I think, at Connect, but it was still in extreme preview. Can I say that? It was extremely preview-ish.
Makes sense to me.
Perfect. Now it's finally in a place where I'm very proud to show it. Right? So let me show you what I mean. What we can do now is we can describe our builds as YAML files. Right. So before I demo, I just want to make sure this is very clear. This is not a new build system. The build system is not changing in VSTS. This is just another way to describe the build. And the task-based build system and the YAML build, we're just feeding it into a build engine that's the exact same build engine. So we can now describe our builds as YAML, and we can save that in our source control, and then it can just be triggered automatically. So the easiest way to figure out what your YAML would look like is let's go ahead and take a look at a build. So here's my build, and I forgot to clean up, so let me go ahead and delete some stuff here really quickly. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to pop open one of my builds, my Mercury Web build, and let's go ahead and edit this. Because one of the things that you can see now in the UI is a view as YAML. And if I view this, it will literally take this build task definition and translate it into a YAML file, which now I can just go ahead and copy this. And I can go into my code. And from my code, let me delete this quickly. So this would just be the repo that has all of my code. I can go ahead and create my YAML file. And I'm going to name this very carefully. I'm going to name it .vsts-ci.yaml. Click on create. I'm going to go ahead and paste in everything. Let's go commit this. And now, if we go to our builds, you'll see that we automatically created a build based off of that YAML file for you. And it kicked it off.
It did, yeah.
And if we jump into it, you can see it in real time what it's doing. Well, that's assuming that the agents are free. And notice that these build tasks, they're exactly the same as the task-based build system that we copied it from, right? It's the exact same build. So what people always ask me is, do we have to name it .vsts-ci.yaml? And the answer is no, you don't have to. But if you do, then you will automatically create your CI pipeline like this. Right? You can name it something else, but then you have to come and create your build manually like this, where you can say, let's create a new build. And from here, we'll go ahead and choose the repository. We're going to use the template, which is a YAML template. And from here, we get to choose the path to our YAML file. Remember, it does have to be in your repository. So let's go ahead and search for it, and maybe like my test build.yaml. And then we can save it. If we want to add build variables, you can add build variables. If you want to trigger it and turn this into a CI build, we can enable continuous integration, and then you just go ahead and save it.
That's amazing. So I mean, it's still pretty straightforward doing it that way, but I think for me, it's a small price to put up with the different name of the file to have it all done automatically.
Yeah. So this is exciting stuff, right? Because now in my repo, I can have my .vsts-ci.yaml file. If someone forks my repo, they automatically get my build pipeline as well, right? Just bam, you get it all.
There it is.
This, as a DevOps person, this makes me ridiculous.
Yeah.
Everyone always asks me, okay, this looks great in build. Can you do this for your release pipelines? And unfortunately, the answer is no at this moment, but that is coming soon. That is coming very, very soon.
And when you say soon, I guess you mean pretty soon, because as I say, there's functionality coming left, right, and center all the time, right?
Yeah, we did put new features out every 3 weeks, like clockwork. Every 3 weeks, we just pump out new feature after feature after feature.
Yep. Very exciting. Well, I mean, it's something for me to play. Well, 2 things for me to play with straight away with those approval gates as well. And I look forward to the coming features.
Yeah, very exciting stuff coming up. Build is coming up soon. If you're familiar with the way Microsoft works, we tend to announce things during build and tend to announce things during connect. So stay tuned. There's going to be some really nice things coming down the pipe.
Excellent. Fantastic. Well, that's absolutely incredible, Abel. I really appreciate you taking the time to show us through all of the amazing stuff that's possible with Visual Studio Team Services. I have had a few questions coming in whilst you've been talking.
Okay.
So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to put some of these to you. So one of the ones that I think would be really interesting, particularly because you touched upon it again when we were talking about those automated approval gates, was a question that came in. Could Abel talk a little bit about application insight and how monitoring and getting info back from the running app works? Because this was one of the sources for the decision on whether or not to allow the approval, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how does that all work behind the scenes?
So application when you create for instance, like a web app in Azure, You can also say, I want Application Insight to monitor this particular web application. And you can, in Application Insight, you can start creating different alert rules. So then once you do that, let me go ahead and I can just show you. When you create your gate, you literally choose, I need to choose some like one, there we go. You get to choose which alerts you want to be monitoring. All right, so we can come, I don't know if I have this set up, but we'll see. All right, so I'll turn on the gate. We'll go ahead and create an Azure Monitor. It's going to ask you for your Azure subscription. And if I've already connected my VSTS to my Azure subscription, so it's just in the dropdown. If it's not, then you would just link these two services together. And from here, you get to choose which resource group you're coming from. So let's try that one.
Eurotour, back to that rock star again.
And then you need to choose your resource name. And from here, underneath this resource, I don't have any alert rules set up, but in Application Insight, you would have set up your different alert rules, and you'll be able to pick them from this dropdown and say, this is the alert rule that I want to monitor, and if I start getting alerts from this, let's go ahead and just lock those release.
Excellent. That's terrific. Thank you. And another couple of questions actually around a similar topic. So we had one, can it deploy an app to an on-premise web server? And another, we have VSTS, but not Azure. Can we still use VSTS to automatically deploy to our internally hosted servers?
Absolutely, you can. I'm so glad you guys asked that. Because my charter at Microsoft is to, of course, all roads lead to Azure.
Right? Of course they do.
so I always show Azure. But VSTS literally doesn't care. It can, we always say, any language targeting any platform. So behind your firewall, no problem. All you need to do is install our VSTS agent. That VSTS agent needs to be able to talk to VSTS, and it needs to be able to see whatever machine it's going to deploy on. And that's it. So VSTS doesn't reach into your firewall. Your agent does need to be able to reach out, and it needs to be able to reach whatever machines it deploys on.
Yeah, and I've been through that process, and it's a real simple setup process, isn't it? You download the agent from within the portal, and then it walks you through step by step. Tell us where this is, tell us where that is.
From the portal, you download the agent, and you run a script, and you answer a few questions.
Yeah, really, really straightforward. Okay, so another question here: are all of these features available in TFS?
Most of them are available in TFS. I don't know. I don't think gates are yet, but don't quote me on that. I'll have to go look and see.
Okay, I guess
if they're not, they're going to be coming soon. So TFS features they lag by about 3 months.
Right.
Or 3 or 4 months.
Okay, so we see it in Visual Studio Team Services first, and then those features will work their way down into Team Foundation Server.
Absolutely. So the way our cadences work is every 3 weeks we deliver new features into VSTS. Every 3 to 4 months we bundle up all those changes and we turn that into an update, give it to enterprises, and tell them, here, install this.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Another question here, licensing. How does the licensing of VSTS work? Does everyone on the team need Visual Studio subscription?
No, they absolutely do not, right? So if they have, and once again, to be clear, I am not a licensing or a salesperson, so make sure you check everything that I say. This is not gospel, but I do know this. If you have an MSDN license, VSTS is free. If you do not have an MSDS license, you get 5 licenses for free in VSTS. Anything after that is anywhere from like $6 to $10 or something like that. Right?
Okay, and then that scales pretty easily.
Yeah.
Okay, so another question that just hopped in there, which caught my eye, so I'll go for that one. What if I have an on-prem hosting which is accessible through VPN only? Is there any other way to create a CI pipeline to build and deploy code on a VPN restricted server? Quite specific.
Yeah, pretty specific. It depends on your network topology, but the rule of thumb is my agent needs to be able to talk to VSTS, and my agent needs to be able to see or talk to whatever machine it's installing on.
Yeah.
So if can it be done? Yes, it can. I don't know exactly how unless we dive into that more.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that is quite a specific scenario. So probably some additional assistance might be needed there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we had another question. What process do you suggest for projects that work across multiple databases on different SQL Server instances? The projects are written mostly in T-SQL and some C#.NET.
Well, first of all, I would use a database project of some sort, whether you use Redgate tools. You guys have fantastic tools.
Thank you so much.
That can totally help in this scenario. Right? So as a slight plug in, Microsoft has solutions too, but you guys really have some fantastic tools.
Thank you.
So I would suggest use Redgate tools.
Excellent. And if you are interested in, I guess, the database side of things, then by all means head on to the Redgate website, red-gate.com/webinars. Excuse me, I can't get my words out. And there you'll see a whole bunch of recordings from previous webinars that we've done that focus specifically on the database, many of which are using similar tools to Abel has shown here today, so Visual Studio 2017 and Visual Studio Team Services as well. Also, whilst we're talking, I guess, about Redgate tools, I hope you don't mind, but we have SQL in the City streams coming up on the 28th. And that's going to be, a huge showcase of database-specific functionality, particularly in this database DevOps space. So thanks very much for the question. There is another question here, and actually, Abel, this is one that I get asked all the time. So sure. I'd love to hear your answer for this as well. And that's, what do we expect? What do you expect to be the biggest blocker to adopting these types of practices and processes within an organization?
Trust.
Trust.
Right?
Okay.
Trust that your tool chain can actually work.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest blocker is going to be organizations that are just not ready for this DevOps transformation yet. Okay. Right. So they don't trust the tool chains. They don't trust their people. Really, it's a people problem.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's back to the culture.
Yes. It's back to the culture. If you can solve your people problem, then everything falls into place. Because, process and tools, that's really the easy part.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the people, it's the culture.
So what do you think the answer is there? Is it a case of breaking it down into kind of small, little achievable tasks that garner that support and encourage people to trust the process more and more as they go through?
That's one way of doing it, right? Success breeds more success and more adoption. The easiest, the most successful things that I've seen is when it starts from the very top. Your CEO or CTO of a company goes to some conference, comes back, and the agile bug has bit him. He's drank the DevOps Kool-Aid. This is what we're going to do. I get it now. If we don't do this, we're going to be out-innovated, and our competitors are going to crush us. Right? They get that message, and then they push it all the way down. That's the easiest way. To push up is so difficult. But my boss, Donovan, he always says, start with what hurts the most.
That makes sense.
There's always something that hurts the most. So whether it's I've gone into some customers where they don't even use source control yet, and it kind of blows my mind. They have a shared drive that they do weird copying things and versioning on a hard drive that's shared, or a network drive that's shared, and clearly that's for them, that's what hurts the most. And I'm like, it's 2018, you're still not using a source control. Anyway, so clearly, let's start with the source control for you first. Right. There are companies out there where they're still not very good at their CI, and so you would help them there. For mostly what we've seen, people have source control down. They have the automated build system down. Where they have trouble now is that release pipeline. Right? So find what hurts the most, start there, and success does breed more success.
Keep pushing, keep pushing. Yeah, a little success goes a long way, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think we've probably got time for one more question. So another one that's just come in here, really cool stuff. Would you be able to use Visual Studio Team Services with a remote staging server that pushes to a local production server We only have FTP access to the remote server. Again, quite a specific scenario. I mean, is it possible to give some general advice there?
Once again, the rule of thumb is if your agent can see VSTS and whatever machine it's deploying to, it's not a problem. If FTP is the only way, there are tasks in VSTS. There are FTP tasks that you can FTP as well. So my first thought is, sure, but we would need some more details.
Yeah, it sounds likely, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Abel. I really enjoyed your presentation. Absolutely delighted to have seen you again and been able to share this experience with you. Thank you to everybody for joining us as well today and for your questions. We will be emailing out the recording early next week. But in the meantime, as I tried to say earlier, if you'd like to find out more about the DevOps approach to database development, then please do head to red-gate.com/webinars. I got it that time, where you'll find all of our previous webinar recordings, including how to implement database DevOps at scale in 5 steps. We'll also send a link to that particular webinar in the follow-up emails. Remember, you can contact us as well at the address that's on the screen here, so database devops@red-gate.com. And there's a link to our solution page, red-gate.com/database DevOps. And indeed, Abel's been kind enough to share his contact details, Twitter, and a web page there for you guys as well.
Yes, if you guys have any questions at all, feel free to tweet at me. I very rarely check my email, and I get in a lot of trouble for that, but I still very rarely check my email. But I am obsessive on Twitter, so I'm on Twitter all the time.
Fantastic. Excellent. So everybody, thank you once again for your time. I'm going to wrap up the presentation today. Thank you again, Abel, and I look forward to next time we meet.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.